32 pieces of an aeroplane washed ashore around the Indian Ocean. 3 of them were confirmed to be Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. 3 out of 32. This is the page where one of those decisions was made. A fragment that came ashore in Mozambique, and 3 rows of painted letters, 676EB. The top row was photographed on the debris. The middle row is Malaysia Airlines stencil. The bottom row is Boeing's. That comparison is how a scrap of composite became evidence. This is not a video about where the aeroplane is. It's about how you prove that a piece of rubbish on a beach used to be an aircraft carrying 239 people, and what the pieces said when they were asked. Start with the one everybody remembers. On the 29th of July 2015, 16 months after the aircraft disappeared, a man clearing rubbish from a beach at Saint-Denis on the French island of La Réunion found a slab of white composite about 2 meters long, crusted with barnacles. La Réunion is roughly 4,000 kilometers west of the search area. The piece was a flaperon, a control surface from the trailing edge of a wing, part aileron, part flap. It went to a French defense laboratory near Toulouse, and on the 3rd of September 2015, the French judicial authority confirmed it belonged to MH370. In the Malaysian summary, this is item 1. One line in the remarks column. Confirmed by French judicial authority belonging to MH370 on oath reached in September 2015. Until that moment, everything about MH370 was inference. Satellite handshakes, radar seams, arcs drawn on an ocean. The flaperon was the first physical object anybody could hold. It did not say where the aircraft was. It said for certain that it had come apart and that the sea had been carrying its pieces west for 16 months. So, how do you do it? How does a fragment become an identification? There are 3 methods in this report, and you can watch all 3 happen on its pages. The first is lettering. Item 2 was found on Dagatane Beach, Mozambique, in December 2015. A piece of the right wing's number 7 flap support fairing. On it, partially legible, 676EB. Investigators set that against 2 reference stencils, the one Malaysia Airlines used and the one Boeing used. The letter forms matched. The second method is shape. Item 5, a door stowage closet panel from Rodriguez in Mauritius, carries a figure caption in the report, comparison of recovered item with the Malaysia Airlines Boeing 737 door R1 panel assembly. They laid the fragment against the drawing. The third method is the one that ends arguments, a serial number. Item 19, a section of the right outboard flap found on Pemba Island off Tanzania in June 2016, carried a part number that traced to a specific outboard flap, shipped to Boeing as line number 404. Line number 404 was delivered to Malaysia Airlines and registered 9 Mike Romeo Oscar. That is the aircraft. Not a 777. That 777. Notice what none of these methods are. Nobody recognized it. Nobody's instinct was involved. A stencil, a drawing, a serial number. That is the whole of it. There is a second document, 64 pages, issued in February 2017, and it contains the actual examinations, item by item, with the reasoning shown. And it reveals something the summary doesn't, what they physically did with these pieces. At Subang in Malaysia, there was a Boeing 737 200ER that had been operated by Malaysia Airlines in a hangar, undergoing a maintenance check. 9 separate times in that report, a piece of debris is carried to that aircraft and held against it. Take item 6, found south of Chidengal in Mozambique in April 2016. 18 inches long, 8.44 kilogram. composite honeycomb with a non-metallic core, dark grey on the outside, white on the inside, a fragment of a metal bracket still attached. The mounting for something called a hold open stay rod. They took it to the aircraft at Subang. The hinge bracket matched, the number of fasteners matched, the spacing between the fasteners, the pitch, matched. The mount for the stay rod matched in location, in shape, and in size. And then the detail that tells you what kind of people were doing this work. 2 words were still legible on the debris. Hoist point. They were in the correct position for a fan cowl. And the report notes that the fonts used for those 2 words matched the fonts on the fan cowl of the aircraft in front of them. They compared the typeface. Item 22 is a panel from the right vertical stabilizer, the tail fin. The report observes that the red and white paint on it and the way the colors are arranged appear to match the Malaysia Airlines kite logo on the right side of the tail, a piece of the airline's own emblem, washed up on a beach in Mozambique. I want to show you one that failed, because it is the reason to trust the rest. Item 8 was found at Grigri Beach in Mauritius in May 2016. It looked like a flap-track fairing tail cone from a 777, and it was better than that. It had legible numbers on the inner surface, a part number 113W9154-401, and a serial number 407. The part number was cross-referenced against Boeing's component maintenance manual and drawings. That worked. It identified the piece as part of a wing flap fairing assembly, and the fit closely matched the number 1 flap track fairing. Then they went after the serial number because a serial number should name the individual aircraft, and the report says this: further research and identification of serial number 407 did not directly link the part to the Malaysia Airlines aircraft registration 9 Mike Romeo Oscar. They had a part number, a serial number, and a shape that fitted, and they still wrote down that it did not close. Item 8 is graded highly likely, not confirmed. Compare that with item 19, where the number did trace through to line number 404, delivered to Malaysia Airlines as 9mm MRO. Same team, same method, 2 different answers, both written down. Elsewhere, the report is blunter still. On one piece, the exact location on the aircraft could not be identified since it had no markings or numbers and no peculiar features to match against. On another, there is no conclusive evidence to determine the origin of this part. That is what a real investigation reads like. Put all 32 finds on one map and something becomes visible. La Réunion, Mozambique, several, Mauritius, Madagascar. Repeatedly, at Riak Beach on Nosy Baraha and at Ant Siraka, South Africa, at Mossel Bay and Kosi Bay Mouth, Tanzania, at Pemba Island. Every single one is on the western side of the Indian Ocean. Not one piece has ever been recovered on the Australian coast to the east. That is not an accident of who was looking. The southern Indian Ocean's currents run west. Anything floating in the search area drifts toward Africa and takes between 16 months and 2 years to arrive. The dates in the report line up with that. The first find in July 2015, then a cluster through 2016, then a long tail out to 2018. The debris field behaved exactly like a debris field should, given where the satellite data said the aircraft came down. That is the strongest thing the pieces do. Individually, most of them are ambiguous. Collectively, their timing and their landfall are consistent. And consistency across 32 independent objects is hard to fake and hard to dismiss. When the flaperon arrived in France, it was covered in barnacles, mostly on one surface. Under the direction of the French investigating judge, That colony was handed to marine biologists, not aviation investigators, biologists, because the Barnacles had been keeping records. The species was identified as Lepus anatifera striata. It matters that it was that one. This subspecies is strictly pelagic, the report's word, meaning it only ever lives on objects floating in open ocean. It cannot grow on the seabed, and it cannot grow on a beach. Its presence is proof on its own that the flaperon spent its missing months drifting on the surface rather than sitting on the bottom. Then they measured them. The largest specimen was big enough that its initial settlement, the moment a larva attached to that piece of wing, would have been 15 to 16 months before the flaperon was found. The aircraft disappeared 16 months before the flaperon was found. Then they did something I find genuinely remarkable. A barnacle shell grows in layers, and the chemistry of each layer records the temperature of the water it grew in. So they read the layers like tree rings. The youngest growth had formed in water of 25.4 degrees, matching the sea around Réunion, where it washed up. But the oldest growth the first layers laid down had formed in water of about 28.5 degrees, warmer. And when they compared that to sea temperature maps for the preceding months, the warmer water sat east-northeast of Réunion, out towards the search area. One more thing. Barnacles grow toward the light and the water. From where the colony sat on the flaperon, the biologists could tell which way up it had been floating. Belly face up, the underside of the wing riding on top, the upper surface submerged. The report is careful, and so are we. It states there are no elements to determine precisely how long those valves took to grow, and it cites only 2 experimental studies on the growth rates of pelagic anatifers, one from 1958, one from 2010. This is an estimate with its uncertainty printed next to it. But think about what it is. A piece of wing washed up with no flight recorder, no serial plate visible, no witnesses, and the animals living on it recorded roughly how long it had been at sea, roughly how warm the water was, which direction it had come from, and which way up it floated. 3 pieces cleared the bar. Item 1, the right flaperon, La Réunion. Item 10, a section of the left outboard flap from Île Banache in Mauritius, May 2016. The remark reads simply, this part is confirmed from MH370. And item 19, the right outboard flap, Pemba Island. 2 of the 3 are flaps. That turns out to matter more than anything else the debris produced. Flaps are what a pilot extends to land. If someone had been at the controls attempting to put that aircraft down on the water in a controlled ditching, the flaps would have been out. So the investigators examined the damage on item 19 and item 1, how the metal had torn, which fittings had failed, in what direction. Their conclusion is in section 2.6.3 of the final report, and it is careful. The right outboard flap was most likely in the retracted position, and the right flaperon probably at, or close to, the neutral position. At the time, they separated from the wing. Retracted, not extended. Nobody was setting up to land. Now hold on to how that conclusion was reached. Because it was not reached by finding the aeroplane. It was reached by reading the tear patterns on 2 pieces of wing that washed up on 2 islands, 3,000 kilometers apart, a year apart. That leaves the rest. 6 pieces graded almost certain, 8 highly likely, 3 likely, and 11 of the 32 carry a remark 2 words long, not identifiable. Item 13, item 14, item 17, item 21, items 23, 24, 25, 28, 29, 30 and 32, photographed, weighed, catalogued, given a reference number and a date and the name of a beach, and then not identifiable. Item 25 has its own appendix in the final report, and the appendix is titled, plainly, Unidentified Part. Some of them are tiny. There is an entry recording 2 fragments weighing 235 grams and 215 grams, about the weight of a paper bag each. Against part number, the report writes nil, against serial number nil, and yet even those were pursued. One cabin fragment carried white vinyl, printed with a rice plant pattern, a design the report states is unique to the Malaysia Airlines 770 and 747 interior, confirmed against the airline's own interior specifications. Someone went and checked the wallpaper. Which brings us to Item 11. Riag Beach, Nosi Boraha Island, Madagascar, the 6th of June 2016. It went to Subang and was held against the aircraft like all the others, and it was identified as the seatback trim panel, the molding that encases the in-flight entertainment screen, the back of somebody's seat. And in the report, there is one more sentence about it. There was a small fragment of fabric still caught around the coat hanger on the debris, greenish in color, and that color matched the seat fabric. A coat hanger on the back of a seat in a cabin with a scrap of upholstery still attached to it, washed up on an island off Madagascar. The examination's conclusion is precise, and it is worth hearing exactly as written. This part is confirmed to be the seat back trim panel encasing the IFE monitor, and is highly likely to be from MH370. Confirmed as to what it is, highly likely as to where it came from. 12 years on, that piece is still officially a probability. One more result before the verdict, because it closes a door that a lot of people still have open. The recovered pieces were tested for explosive residue. The report's line is one sentence long. Of the pieces tested so far, no traces of explosion were found. Not, we think it wasn't a bomb. No traces on the pieces they had. So what did the debris actually settle? It settled that the aircraft came apart, rather than landing intact somewhere. It settled from the Barnacles that the wreckage floated for well over a year, having entered the water somewhere warmer and further east. It settled that the pieces drifted west on a schedule matching the satellite arcs, and it settled from tear patterns on 2 flaps that the wing was not configured for a landing. What it did not settle is the only question anybody actually wants answered. 32 pieces across 7 countries and 3 years, and not one of them tells you where the aircraft is. The search has now covered more than 140,000 square kilometers of seafloor and found nothing. The debris is still, today, the only physical evidence that exists, which is why the way it was examined matters. Not a recognition, not a hunch, a stencil, a drawing, a serial number, and a tear pattern. Written down, photographed, numbered 1 to 32, and published where anyone can check it. 3 confirmed, 11 not identifiable. Everything in between graded in writing with the uncertainty left in. That is what an honest answer looks like, when the honest answer is, we still don't know. Every document in this video is public. They're linked below. Go and read Item 11 yourself.